Aloha everybody, good morning. My name is Crystal. Thank you so much for coming into the library for our event today. So we have Kumu Kaleikoa here. And Kumu Kaniʻau. Our topic today is Hawaiian language in film. So each of the kumu have their own presentations that they would like to share with you guys and their own mana'o. I hope that you guys enjoy. Thank you so much again for coming.
Bilina me ke aloha. Ano ai? Wau nei o Kaleikoa Kaʻeo, he kiki papa no ino ke mokopuni o Maui. Ana ia, mana wahiliki ole o Maui. Ka nui o ko ua o Piupio, e noho ana noho i wa kihei kukoa. No hana, hamoa, mokai ko makua kanema, ko koe kupuna no kela ao ko makua hini no hoi, no ililani, no Ireland hoi, so kanaka ke ia. Nui ko mahalo ka poe nana e ho kele nei ke papahana. Mahalo nui. No leila me ke ia, iki no hoi kako, I ka vai o ka ho'ola ho ia ana o keia olelo o iwi o keia pai aina o iho i ka olelo makuahine o ka olelo Hawaii. Nui ko umahalo ka poe nana I hana nui no ka ho'ola ho ana ma ka ho'ona awau I ana o enti hoku ma nei aloha nui enti hoku o ia ke kahi o ka poe OGs nana I mea Eli Kalepo kanu ano no hoi ho'opulu ani ka vai ho'ulu ho ia ke mea o ka olelo Hawaii. Mahalo, aloha nui. And I'd like to again mahalo, thanks first of all those who put this together to help educate our student population and faculty and everyone here who's come out from the community perhaps. A little bit about understanding the value of Hawaiian language, in particular in this revitalization period of our language and our people. And I just want to acknowledge Auntie Hoku Laniholt for her work in the past, as they say, one of the original OG farmers who brought back many of the ways in which our language could be taught again and brought to life again. So very honored to come and share a little bit about my ideas in regards to maybe films and Hawaiian language. Now, let me kind of just dive in. I'll kind of give a little more political, perhaps, perspective on not just language and Hawaiian language, but really about filmmaking and the role of filmmaking and that narrative that which films are used. I also teach a class called Hawaiian Studies through film. I've been taught in a couple of years, but it's a real good class and looking at important themes in so-called Hawaiian Studies, but looking at the kinds of films that we have in Hawaii and also the rest of the Pacific. So I'll be talking a little bit about that kind of stuff, really, in my perspective, and how that kind of relates with Hawaiian language. So the first thing we need to kind of start off to do is have a kind of good understanding a little about the history of how we ended up in this particular situation. I'll be very, very brief. As you all should know, there was a time when we roughly had close to 1 million, perhaps, Hawaiian language speakers at the time in the arrival of Captain Cook. Many of the anthropologists and historians today, of course, look at the question of the population of these islands prior to Cook. And although the original estimate was about 400,000 by Captain King and the arrival of Cook, today many of those who work with demography and looking at the question of population have really raised those numbers and are pushing between 800,000 as much as 1 million perhaps in these islands. And it might be hard for us to kind of have a good understanding of that. However, when you look at the actual evidence that's out there, specifically in the lands, anybody been to Kauai before? Anybody been to Napali Coast? Been up Napali Coast, in places like New Lolokai, New Loloaina, Miloli'i. I mean, this is the most remote areas in the islands. And you go back in a valley like New Loloaina, where virtually to the very back of the valley of the Napali Coast was planted, where hundreds of people lived in valleys that today, in fact, have no one. Or if you've been in back of valleys like Honopohau or even places like Kahakuloa, and virtually, as far as you see on the valley floor, to the very back of the valleys are terraces of plants. Anyway, so the bottom line, we know we're producing a lot of food For whom? Well, a lot of eaters, of course. So we talk about Hawaiian language, we got to remember when Captain Cook came, there were a whole lot of speakers. And Hawaiian language, of course, is part of the Polynesian language family, the Proto-Polynesian language family. Our first cousins, of course, the languages like Tahitian, people of Marquesas and Kuhiva, people from Rapa Nui, people from Aotearoa. And our so-called second cousins would be maybe Samoan, Tongan, and some of the Fijian languages, in which you can see we have this very, very close language, which means we also have a very close culture in the way we look at the world. Now, however, of course, we know since the arrival of Cook, depopulation and really population collapse happened in these islands. By 1893, after the so-called overthrow and landing of the US troops, the Hawaiian language population probably was about 60,000, whereby about 40,000, in fact, might even be higher. We do know, in regards to Native Hawaiians, there were about 40,000 Native Hawaiians at that time, in 1893. But most of the people, almost virtually all of the people that were living in Hawaii, spoke Hawaiian, in fact, was the everyday language of commerce, everyday language of the courts, everyday language of society. So whether they were immigrants that came from Japan or China who had come during that period, including the Caucasians and Europeans and Americans who came at that time, they also spoke Hawaiian, and Hawaiian became the language of the land. So we kind of got to remember that. When we look to maybe about 20 years ago, it was identified perhaps that we had about 1,000 Hawaiian language speakers that were left at that time. And most of those so-called native speakers have passed on, right? We go 20 years today. Most of the native language kupuna that I worked with at that time were in the 80s and 90s. In fact, most of them already have passed on. So it's very rare today that we find what's called a so-called native speaker. We also have a whole group of newer Hawaiian speakers of today, whether who learn it from the Puna Naleo or Hawaiian language immersion programs, really are the new speakers of this language today. So we're in a process of revitalization. That's the important thing to remember. This is not just a language per se, a language that needs to be learned, like learning Spanish or French. That when you become a Hawaiian language speaker, you are actually part of a revitalization movement of language. That every time you re-speak a word, it's bringing life, not just to the word, but bringing back life to our so-called people. Now, let me just try to jump from that. So when we talk about today, we got to remember, most of the Hawaiian language revitalization efforts are happening in places like in the schools, Punana Leo and Hawaiian language immersion schools, and also at so-called colleges. What's fortunate, of course, is that really you find Hawaiian language in the last 20 years have also began to reappear, and again, reappear. This is not something new in formats, whether it's on the radio, whether it's in YouTube, as you might see. And in fact, now we also have a television station like OEV TV that you can actually learn Hawaiian from and actually view and hear Hawaiian being spoken and actually see Hawaiian stories being told in a Hawaiian manner. And we also have several films that have come out in the past years. A good friend of mine, Kaʻeo Nismith, in fact, kind of interesting, his work recently in the past few years has actually translated some of the so-called classical literature of today. The Harry Potter series, for example, that in fact recently has been translated into Hawaiian, The Hobbit and some other works. So it's a very reproductive time in regards to Hawaiian language. We also know, again, Hawaiian language wasn't just the language of the court system and the government here in the past, but also Hawaiian was a very largely circulated language in regards to the academics and literature. Most of you perhaps don't know that through the 1800s that we had tens of newspapers, daily newspapers in fact. They were printed throughout the island starting in 1834 with Kalama Hawaii from Lahaina Luna. But you had periods where you might have a dozen Hawaiian language newspapers coming out of every island that would be produced and shipped throughout the islands. And these newspapers were so highly valuable. They weren't just newspapers that were just talking to the Hawaiian community, but these were newspapers that actually were able to take information from the rest of the world. And again, this is a period where you need to take a Hawaiian Studies class, of course, learning that, and consider one time one of the most literate societies in the world, if not the most literate society in the world. And so even the great classics of Europe themselves were translated. Yeah, you want to go read Ivanhoe, 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Hamlet, Tarzan, arithmetic stories and geometry and surgery, and all these things his textbooks had already been translated. So when we think about films today, my point is, this is not nothing new. Yeah, this is a rebirth of what we already have done. Now, kind of jumping ahead, so we've had, in fact, Hawaiian Language has produced a couple of, not feature films, but there's been a couple of very important films in the past that was produced by the Hapuna Naleo and some real good friends of mine. Things like, see my brain now. Kalani Mainu'u, mahalo, yeah, Kalani Mainu'u, wonderful film. All my children grew up loving that film. And then the other one was, not La'i but one from Kauai. What's that? Kaiʻanui. So those two films you can find probably here at the library. These are two Hawaiian language films. But what's also have been happening at the same time is that at UH Manoa, I know there were a couple of plays and productions that have come out, dramas that they have produced in the past. One, for example, Kamapua'a, which had traveled through the islands. At the same time, about 20 years ago, maybe actually more than 20 years ago now, had dramas and hula, kind of like a hula opera, for example, which was produced. Holomai Pele, which is also much Hawaiian in that. And, even recent plays that have gone on, like La'i Kawai and stuff, you can actually see and watch on OEV TV. So this is nothing new, that's the point. This is kind of a rebirth also. So it's something that Hawaiian language is growing, not just something that's stuck in the classroom or, in campuses, but things that are actually kind of getting out into the modern world, into modernity. This is a way in which we exist outside of the four walls of a classroom. So it's a very exciting time. So let me just kind of, I know I said too much already, I'm talking, I'm gonna get right to what I wanted to say. And so, one of the things I always was asked about Moana, in fact, let me just be honest, I've never actually watched the whole film. Yeah, I've only seen particular parts, and there's reasons for that. I have a huge critique of Disney in general, and so I have issues in regards to just a Disney story. Now, how many of you have saw things like Pocahontas before? Now, should Pocahontas be translated into Hawaiian? This is the first question I ask. Well, you see, this is where it gets funky. Now, let me give you examples. When I was teaching up in the high school in Hawaiian Language Immersion, I was actually searching for some work. I had gotten some curriculum. These were actual work that was given out that we were supposed to use as teachers to teach history of plantations, for example, in Hawaii. And I remember opening up the curriculum and I'm starting to look through the stories and I'm reading it. I was like, why the hell did they select something like this? This was a very anti-Hawaiian story that was just translated into Hawaiian. And in fact, it was originally written in Hawaiian. But my point is, we got to be very careful and understand, just because something is in Hawaiian, it doesn't mean it's good for us, you see. It doesn't mean it benefits us. It doesn't mean it shapes our mind in the correct way. So when I ask those questions, for example, like Pocahontas, it's a very tricky situation. Of course, we want to have Hawaiian in this kind of modern world in film. But as someone that understands, well, let me ask you guys, well, who was Pocahontas? Let me ask, well, first of all, let me go right to the end. The story that you see produced by Disney, was that based upon anything correct or factual? Not at all. In fact, what you'll find, this is a common so-called settler colonial narrative that, in fact, is a good word for you guys to learn here in college called othering. Yeah, othering is a process many times anthropological or social or in ways in which you try to other. And I'm going to describe. I think about anthropologists. Yeah, they come in and they'll study our people, right? They'll mark down, oh, they do this, they do that, they jump here, they eat these kinds of foods. And what you find really in that kind of narrative, speaking or talking about others or othering is not really about the other, right? If I say, oh, those guys are dirty heathens, they're evil, what am I actually saying? If they are evil, I am not. They're uncivilized. Well, of course, I must be civilized. So what you understand is these kinds of ways are not about the other. It's really about a way of defining themselves, right? If I make them black, I am white. If they are poor, I am rich. And so films like Pocahontas are really not about Pocahontas and the people that Pocahontas came from. It's really about Disney, their empire, those who buy their movies to say, wow, man, we weren't that bad anyway. You know, John Smith and Pocahontas, man, they had a love affair. And you buy into this whole false narrative, and I mean, it's not a false narrative. It's a narrative that tries to depict those who somehow believe that, yeah, John Smith was a good guy. When in reality, that's the farthest from the exact truth that actually occurred. Now, sadly, I actually had a fight with I'm telling you stories, I had a fight with a Hawaiian language professor once before about this issue. And he was saying, oh, it's such a wonderful movie. And I said, well, for who? Is it a wonderful movie for the people by which Pocahontas and her people come from? And the question you got to ask is, why not tell the truth? Why is this need to mythologize and fakery and kind of create this narrative of story making? Who is it serving? And what you really find, of course, it serves the business interests of people like Disney. Anyway, I just wanted to be clear about it. So when we watch, for example, films in my classes, these are some of the things we talk about. Now, there's also value to those kinds of films. For example, if you ever watch the movie Hawaii, and everybody says, oh, James Michener's Hawaii. One of the first films I watched in my class, right? Beautiful, it came out in color. I mean, it was the top movie of its time in the early 60s. Beautiful scenery. Of course, almost all of it bullshit in regards to historical context. But even in the ugliness, again, it had nothing to do with the Hawaiians who were here. The story that was told, like Queen Malama and all those things that were going on, it really was about talking about who the so-called interests of the so-called missionaries that had come, Reverend Hale. But even in that film, there are certain moments that kind of unveil and show truth. There's an important scene, in fact, if you remember the movie, The Hawaiians, where Reverend Hale runs down to the beach because he had heard that his favorite trainee, Kyoki, who becomes, the minister, who wants to become a minister, this is when they're rolling in the surf, and he ends up marrying his sister, and he has a child, and the child is born with a mark on his face and so forth, and they have to go save the child. But eventually what happens, there's a child who dies from the sickness of fever. And Reverend Hale runs down there all upset. And when they ask him, why is he upset? He's upset because he didn't get a chance to baptize the child before he died. He wasn't upset because the child died. See, that's the point. He wasn't sad because the child died. He just was sad because I didn't get to baptize it before he died. And to me, there's this, even in those films that are so-called ugly in a sense of humanity, I always say, but there are truth that come out of them, because that mentality, I believe, in fact, is still very prevalent to this day. This sense of need to somehow save the so-called Hawaiian, and this sense of it being really about their so-called gaze or power to see and view. Okay, so let me go jump to something like other films that we've had in the past. We can take something like what was once called The Barbarian Princess. It was the original title of what film? Princess Kaiʻanui, that film. I explained, oh, that's my favorite film. I said, oh my goodness, need an education. Most of that film also is not based, and then the question is, why not just tell the truth? Why is this need to lie or make up stuff? And the thing is, why? Why is this need not just tell a real story? Because it's not our story, right? You see, you gotta understand, it's the story being produced by those who, in a sense, are trying to tell their story. We're just a backdrop. See, we're just a backdrop. Now, let me jump to something. I know I'm kind of running out of time already. No? How much I get?
3 minutes.
Oh, 8 minutes. Oh, 8 minutes. Okay, let me see. Let me just jump into some other stuff. Now, I understand artistic license is important. This is part of the process. But at the same time, we must also understand that we always have to question, what is the purpose of that film? Who is it benefiting? Who is it telling? Whose story is telling for whom? Whose benefit? And this is an important trait to always ask in all films. So when I look at a film like Moana, from the very beginning, I had questions. Why? I just look at the historical, factual ways in which Disney has produced films in the past. So my first question to those, in fact, who were involved was, is this a Hawaiian story? Is this a Polynesian story? It gets funky, because now you start to find out who made the edits. Who decided what scenes to be kept in and kept out? Who decided the storyline? Who decided, for example, when you look at the character Maui, How is Maui portrayed? How would you describe Maui? Yeah, okay. And what else? How is physical? I mean, I never ever grew up thinking Maui looked like that. But the question is, who decided, why make Maui into that particular physical presence? What is that about? Who is that story empowering? You know, we can look at even the main character, Moana, for example. You know, I'm not saying they're all negative, but my point is, from the very beginning, we must at all times challenge and question who, why, and what is being told. Now, see, I look at other great films and books you can look at. If you're interested in stuff, you can look at a book called Real Injun. Real, R-E-E-L, and Indian, like Injun, I-N-J-U-N, which is actually a book and film that talks about how cinema has used so-called American Indians and Native Americans in Hollywood. See that? And my point is, if you actually understand that history and you understand the analysis, you can quickly look at Hawaiian films and you can see exactly the same kind of history, the same kind of expectations and control on the film. Now, I would hope at some time, not just in the Hawaiian, because I'm not saying the Hawaiian, there's nothing wrong in the Hawaiian, there's nothing bad per se. I just would have hoped, in fact, if I had the power, is not, when I look at issues of why don't we have our own film? Now the question of producing our own film for me is not a question of not having enough money. So if you understand the politics of Hawaii, you quickly understand we actually have a lot of money in our coffers as so-called Hawaiian people. The question is, well, who is controlling this particular money and funds? There's no reason, in fact, that we cannot have these kinds of films being produced and written by our people. For whom? For ourselves, from our perspectives, from our way of seeing this particular world, how the story should be told. And perhaps we might not make Maui look in that particular way. Maybe the storyline and even the part that got to me from the very beginning was, to me, it's like a Pele character. I don't know what that character, that mother evil, whatever kind of character. I don't know. I mean, my point, where does it come from? What story is that from? Is that some Hollywood agents or producers' fantasy? That's what it looks like to me. I never heard any Hawaiian or Polynesian stories that represented that particular antagonist in the story. And so for me, it's always been the question of why is that being produced in that way? Whose fantasy is being produced? Whose fantasy is being propped up? And at whose expense? Now, is there negativity to our people? I don't know enough. But I cannot go far enough to recognize that it's really, when I look back at the history of films in Hawaii, whether it's, I can look at the Hawaiians, and can I find some appealing stuff from the Hawaiians? Yeah. That was one of the first films you ever saw Hawaiians, was the Hawaiians. I remember watching Hawaii Five-O as a young boy. You know why? Because they had a couple of Hawaiian characters. They had Zulu, remember Zulu? And they had Sergeant, forget the sergeant's name already, it's in my brain. But yeah, this couple, I mean, that's the only characters you saw. Now, unfortunately, today, think about the Hawaii Five-O of today, just to make the connection. What's the Hawaiian in the Hawaii Five-O today? Well, they get some Hawaiian. They get Hawaiian names. They get Hawaiian street signs, Hawaiian characters. That's language. That's language. The title is all in Hawaiian. And then you look at Officer Kalakaua. Who is Officer Kalakaua in Hawaii Five-O? One Korean guy and a Korean. And you go, what the hell they got to do with us? And in fact, once in a while you might have a Hawaiian in the background. But see, my point is, when I look at things like Moana, I'm trying to say there's a direct connection. I don't see it as being that much different in many ways. Yeah, we can look at new shows like Magnum P.I., same thing that they have out there. Somebody is pimping and using Hawaii as a backdrop, again, not because it has anything to do with us, but because it has to do with so-called empire and the settler colonial fantasy of creating this sense of, again, who they are. So whether it was Blue Hawaii by Elvis, okay, Right? Think about Blue Hawaii. I mean, when I grew up, you know what my favorite TV show I remember I was so happy was Brady Bunch. And some of the older guys remember because Brady Bunch came to Hawaii and that was the most important episode ever. My God, they're in Hawaii. I see Sam Kapoor singing one song. I mean, for us it was like amazing. So I'm not saying, again, more, I just understand its limitation in regards to what it's meant to be. Yeah. Now, the good news, of course, I think there are many Hawaiians who are trained, gain skill in translation, in screenwriting, in acting, right? So that's the positive, right? We can take these kinds of skills. But eventually, my dream, of course, is that we'll be able to tell our own stories for our own purposes, using Hawaiian language in a way that we see fit and best for the community. So with that, mahalo nui. I know I rambled on, but mahalo.
Mahalo, kumu Kaleikoa. I'm pretty sure he has other stuff that he wants to share, so you can always ask and he'll ramble for you too. But there's a sign-in sheet in the back. I forgot to ask in the beginning, but before you guys leave, if you guys can sign in back there, thank you so much. And now we'll have Kaʻanui with her mana'o.
Okay, aloha nui a kako, wau no keia Papaikaniʻau Kaiʻanui, he kama no keia ʻaina, he kama no keia wahine ma'aneʻi. Me enike me ka Kaleikoa I ʻolelo ai, aia no mākou malela ma ka hoʻomaka ana, I ka kumu hou ia ana o ka ʻolelo Hawaiʻi ma keia ʻaina. Aia no wau ma ke ano he haumana, I kia manawa ma ke ano he kumu, no leila hike u ke wehe ma ke lama au e lua. O ko'u kuleana e wehe na mea kiko I ke ia ki'i o niwani, no ke mea ole I nana mua ia ka ʻolelo Papaikaniʻau ai ole ka ʻolelo Hawaiʻi e kumu Kaleikoa, no rea oia ko'u kuleana. Okay, so aloha mai kako. Papaikaniʻau Kaiʻanui. I am a professor here of Hawaiian Language and Hawaiian Studies. I am from Maui, born and raised. And I am a child of this lady over here. So just like what Kaleikoa said, we were there at the beginning of the revitalization movement. My mom was one of the OGs, right? And she was the one that planted the seed and had this program be able to flourish here in Maui. So I have a kind of a unique perspective of being there at the revitalization stages as a student and now in the revitalization stages still as a teacher, as a professor. So when I look at Hawaiian language in its beginning years, we have a lot of what's happening in this particular movie, Moana, is we just wanted to get the language out there, right? Bring it back, get it out in the public, be able to hear it, be able to have it in people's homes, have it be in school, have it be in the stores, have it be in public, no matter how we did it, right? So sometimes it wasn't always the most culturally appropriate way. Sometimes it wasn't the most foundationally Hawaiian ways, but it was all about revitalizing the language and getting it in the public domain. So my job is, again, to talk specifically about Moana, but I can talk a lot about Hawaiian language revitalization as well. So just like Kaleikoa has some issues with the Disney enterprise, so do I. So one thing that I wanted to start off with is recognizing that when we look at the different Disney princesses that they decide to produce movies, for example, Little Mermaid, Pocahontas, Mulan, right? So all of those are already established stories, right? So it's a story, it's a character somewhere. But here in Hawaii, Polynesia, we don't have any Moana princess, right? So there's no one with that story, with that name. So again, the idea of why create this whole, and that's kind of what he was saying, create this whole other non-existent story that was supposed to represent us, but Polynesia, right? And I think as Disney, as you know, Disney as an enterprise, they're not going to spend all of this money on something that they're not going to get reinvestment in return, right? So their purpose is to make money commercialized. As soon as Moana came out, or even during the casting periods, they consciously made a decision to cast someone with an American accent, right? So tons of other Polynesian girls auditioned for the film, but they chose Auli'i Carvalho from Hawaii because she could pronounce Polynesian, Hawaiian, other language words, as well as speak proper and pronounce English words in American accent, which that random little girl out there and somewhere on the continent can connect to, yeah, because that was the most important part for them, to be able to commercialize Moana, sell her products, sell her movie. So when this whole thing came out, everybody associated Moana with Hawaii automatically because Auli'i was from Hawaii, when there really wasn't any other connection with Hawaii. Because even if you look at the credits, the contributors or the researchers, they went to Fiji, they went to Aotearoa, they went to Tahiti, they went to Marquesas. They don't really have anybody from Hawaii. So I don't know if you noticed that in the credits. So they didn't really consult with anybody from Hawaii on this particular film. But because Auli'i is from Hawaii, they already associate Moana or the story with us here. The other thing that I wanted to point out is we do have, right, amazing heroines and stories that we share throughout Polynesia. So even if they wanted to pull a character like a Mulan, like a Pocahontas, for lack of a better example, we have tons of examples out there like Hina, right? They could have drawn that character and characteristics from each of the different Polynesian islands to create this princess type of figure. But that's not particularly what they wanted to portray in this film, right? This commercialized, this Disney film. So that's one side of it. Okay, so that's kind of gonna leave the Disney bashing for a bit and talk specifically about Hawaiian language in this film. So when we look at, and we're gonna look at some examples of it. I don't know if, I remember as a child, but I don't know if a lot of you remember the old Chinese fighting movies. So when you have dialogue and it's in English, and then the mouths keep moving. So that's one thing that happens in this movie, right? So again, when you're watching those movies, sometimes it gets really distracting because there's no more dialogue, and then the mouths keep going, or the mouths are going, and there's no dialogue, right? So that's, again, one thing. And like what Kaleikoa was saying, it's amazing to have a commercialized movie in Olelo, Hawaii, right? It's out there in the masses. Olelo, Hawaii, inappropriate usage is recorded by Disney, available to be bought and sold. It's amazing because the people who worked on the Hawaiian are even my crew right there. I have no question on their skills as far as producing Hawaiian language. But I know some of the difficulties is, especially with a movie that's already established, is there's dialogue. So you have to fit this maybe 3 seconds that it's your turn to talk, or Maui's turn to talk, before it switches to Moana, and it's Moana's turn to talk. And in Hawaiian, if you've ever taken Hawaiian language, you know you can't say the same thing in the same amount of time in English that you can Makolala Hawaii, or you can express that same idea. So what I also noticed in watching the Hawaiian version is not only this, mouths not matching the dialogue, and sometimes the lagging between scenes because they'll linger to finish when it's actually the next person's turn to talk. So that's a little bit of what happens in the film. But also sometimes using words that is the best choice for the situation, but to use it because it fits in that space. Yeah, we're gonna use this word because it's 2 syllables and we need to get this message across. We need to get this idea across. So that's what happens in the film as well. Another layer on top of that, besides just the dialogue, is the songs, right? So the songs are already music videos. They have been for years, but now we've got to make it in Hawaiian, right? Maka'olala Hawaii. So keeping the same tempo, keeping the same rhythm, keeping the same melody, and trying to keep the same message as well. So they do a pretty good job of it, but there's a couple of songs where you can tell they just had to, they're like saying the lyrics really fast, and it's not very, what is that, sing-alongable, I don't know, because Disney's big on that sing-along, yeah, so they want you to learn the words, they want you to sing along so that you'll buy the CD, you'll buy the book, you'll buy the movie, you'll sing along. But a lot of the Hawaiian translated songs, you're not able to sing along because they have to fit all of these words, all of these ideas and concepts into the melody, into the tempo, right, into that particular verse. So it kind of, for me, it lost a little bit, because I know the words in English, right? I say, oh, I like this song. But it loses some of that when you try and transition into another language. Yeah. So, and again, I have lots of stuff about Moana. We're just talking about language for right now. Okay, so when we look at also this idea of Moana, because we've heard of Maui as a character from our perspective, but he also exists in all other places in Polynesia. So when the producers of Disney talked about it, they did talk about honoring more of a Polynesian idea and representation of Maui, and not specifically Hawaii, not specifically anyone. Because especially there's a song, well, that's one thing I was interested to see about. So one of my favorite songs in the film is You're Welcome, besides the title, right? So the music video and the lyrics is my favorite, but the title is not my favorite. So I talked about this with my class before, but you know, this idea of thank you and you're welcome is a recent concept or value that was brought here by outsiders. And the reason why we have these words like mahalo is because we try to decode, like, what is this Western value that they have? How do we fit it? Or what's the most equivalent? And for us, it's this word mahalo, right? So mahalo, when used in traditional concept or view, it's you're in appreciation of the person's actions. Yeah, you're in awe of their character, what they do. It's not really saying thank you. And nowadays we use it, and I feel it's a little watered down nowadays than when it was used in traditional times. So the opposite happens as well when we think about this Western concept of you're welcome, right? We don't really have anything for you're welcome, or we don't have anything for you're welcome, mahola Hawaii. It's usually we say stuff like, oh, no big deal, or it's a little thing, or no problem kind of thing. It's not really this idea of placing that attention back on the other person. You are welcome. So in the film, they translate that section as it's for you. Yeah, so no ia. He says, I did it all for you. I did it for humans. I did it for people. I did it so that you have fire. I did it so that you can have longer days. I did it so that you can have all of these things, which is why, like, if you think about it, what I appreciate about this film is that they do convey Hawaiian worldviews and concepts and not just translate. Yeah, so they were able to convey this value that we hold dear, and be able to express it in this particular platform. So looking at, especially, and how many of us, I don't know if we knew that Moana is not Hawaiian? Raise your hand if you thought Moana was Hawaiian. No? Okay, good. So
I did. I'm not gonna lie. I know Maui, but not necessarily Moana.
yeah, so a lot of people think that this person or this princess is Hawaiian, but she is, and this is one thing that I don't agree with, which is not related to the language. It has more to do with the Disney, but this Polynesian grouping that they did, that they don't pull out any one specific, and I know we all descend from the same ancestors, Polynesian, but what they do is they'll mush them together, right? They don't keep the continuity of any one culture. Like, okay, we'll do all the costuming in Samoan fashion. We'll do all the movement and dancing in Tongan. We'll do all the songs in Hawaiian. They actually, many of their songs, they'll mush languages together. Like there's this, one of the sailing songs, it's half in Fijian, half in Hawaiian, which makes it, when you listen to it,
Hawaiian.
yeah. When you listen to it, it's like, oh, it's kind of weird. Yeah, so for lack of a better word, it's kind of weird. So when we look at the use of Hawaiian language to convey these types of concepts, these types of ideas, they did a very good job of it. So Puakia and his team translated as best that they could, but not just translated, but kind of equated Hawaiian mana'o with this, or Hawaiian worldview and Hawaiian mana'o with this Western English storyline. And that's the other thing too, right? So it's a story that we don't necessarily recognize as poe Hawaii, but now we have this story, Maka'olala Hawaii, right? So is this now our story? Maybe yeah. Yeah. Okay, so anybody have any questions for either me or Kaleikoa? So again, knowing that he didn't watch it, so if you have language-specific questions about...
I watched parts of it.
Oh, yeah.
After 5-10 minutes. and just be honest, for me, I would say, the way I look at it, it is a step forward in a way. At least we have Hawaiian language out there. And, like I said, the language, I know they did the best job, and these are talented language people, and, that's not my critique. My critique has always been, it's like knowing what we have. For example, I know we have stories about Moikeha, or stories about Pele, or Hi'iaka. I tell you this, if you've ever read the Hi'iaka story, forget the Moana stuff. We have these huge works of literature. And I would argue, works like the Hi'iaka story is as good as anything you'll find out there. I have no doubt in saying this. And I remember telling some people, I remember reading, there's a part in the Hi'iaka story where Hi'iaka, when she first is given the task to go and get Lohiau Ipo, this is Pele's lover, and she has to go and have this battle with Panaeva. On her first big task is she has to go battle Panaeva, this mo'o. And the description in Hawaiian of the scene, I remember reading this stuff and going, wow. It reminded me a lot of, like, if you ever saw, I'm sure you all did, what's that Twin Towers? Lord of the Rings. Like Lord of the Rings kind of story. The Hi'iaka story is better than the Lord of the Rings stuff. See, my point is, and when you actually read the Hawaiian, how rich it is. It's not a matter of we don't have stories, you see. That's the point. The problem, I'm arguing, is that we're not looking at our own stories first and putting our energy and money and skills to develop those stories. Now, maybe this work here, and that's my push out there to those who control those funds, would see that value on doing those kinds of stories. Because I believe, in fact, we have a very deep and rich stories and literature that would really rock the world out there. And that's why I'm saying, when I don't look at saying, wow, I wish Hawaiians had one story like Moana. Forget Moana, we have stories that go beyond that fantasy that we should be looking at and developing. And you know what the good news is? It's written already in Hawaiian. It's all there. It's not a matter of trying to figure out to go translate an idea, as I said, some kind of fantasy idea, but actually looking at a very deep cultural idea from this place. That's my point. I try to argue that why not look at this place first? Why not see the genius and the beauty and this richness of things that are right here? And so for me, it's when I look at the storytelling, to me that's the most important part. For example, let me just kind of give you an example. I was asked like what I thought about, for example, The Rock. Being asked to play the role of Kamehameha. Now I'll give you even my politics. I had no problem with that, honestly. Now, do we have a Hawaiian out there that's as famous as The Rock? Well, maybe Jason Momoa, the actor. Yeah. I don't know of too much Hawaiians out there that can act like those guys, okay? Now, I know physically, genetically, Rock being Samoan and us, we 99% the same people. Our phenotype, we're the same really. Genealogically, we're the same. When you look at the family tree, we're on the same branch at the very end. So that's not a big issue for me. That's my point. But I was not, people get so crazy about who is playing Kamehameha. Instead of people is not asking a question, what question should they be asking? Who writing the story? Who's producing? That's the main question. It doesn't matter if you have The Rock or Jason Momoa play the part, because who's writing the story? Who's going to tell the story? For whose audience? That's the bigger question, you see. That's why I said we got to put on our grown-up pants and ask the right questions. And that's my point. I want us to understand. So, would it be great to have The Rock play Kamehameha? Let's just have a Kamehameha story? I don't know. What is the story going to be? Is it going to be like a Pocahontas kind of story? Is it going to be a made-up story? When I know the real story is real good. And so that's my point I'm trying to get at. So I want us to really think about it. It's not just simply, what if they said, let's make the Kamehameha story by Disney, and we're going to do it in Hawaiian? Is that a good story? My flags would already go up, and I would start to question. Now, because for my goal is not, and I'll be honest, my goal is not just about having Hawaiians spread around the world. My true goal is about Hawaiians having the capacity to tell our own stories in our own way, but move us, not from the gaze of hoping that how they look at us, and we're going to translate that, how they gaze at us, in a way, so everybody in the world. But I want to have a way in which we can gaze upon ourselves in the right way. We can tell our stories in that way. And again, these are stories that in fact we already have. These are stories that are right there. You can go right now, you can go walk right there, and probably pull out a microfilm, and you can get the actual story right there. Yeah, so it's not a matter of we don't have the stories. It's a matter of organizing and financing ourselves so we can do those stories, which is a political question. Sorry.
Yes, you have a question?
Yeah. You asked a good question. Why not tell the truth? You said, why not tell the truth? You remember you asked that question?
That's it.
Yeah.
Why not tell the truth? Yeah.
Yeah, why not tell the truth?
Well, why do you think so? Why don't you tell the truth? What's your answer to that?
Not so much of why don't, from their perspective, why not I tell the truth to myself? Because truth not the lie out of falsehood. If I have to tell the truth to myself, then maybe I would have to give up a lot of stuff, comfortability that I came used to. Trying to be something, I had to stop dyeing my hair, I had to stop buying a Chandler or clothes, or I would have to go to a whole new transfer, and doing that hurts.
Let me give you a good example. Yeah, I'm sure most of you have seen a film like, what's the Nazi one? Schindler's List, right? Schindler's List, Hollywood success. Horrific story. Based upon true events. I mean, horrific. Let me ask you the question, how come we don't have a story about the Trail of Tears? How come we don't tell the Trail of Tears? How come?
Because of pain. It would cause hurt, shame, guilt that I don't want to deal with. I want to forget about it.
Right. As they say, ignorance is bliss, right? But so that's my point to understand. It's not that, and I would argue, if the United States really wants to face itself in history, these are the kinds of stories they should be telling. And it's very obvious to me why they don't tell those stories. Because those stories will reveal exactly the ugliness of this past, the ugliness and pain that has been portrayed upon these people. Instead, they give you Pocahontas. You see, that's not what you guys understand. That is ethnocide. That is menticide. That is an erasure. They're going to sell you Pocahontas, and you brown natives in America, you should be happy. You got Pocahontas at least. Because they're not going to give you the story of the Trail of Tears. So that's my point. Yeah. Sorry.
It's interesting as you say it, because I think when you look at a context like film, it's an art, but it's also an entertainment. And this is where you get lost in, if it's art's job to tell the truth, but it's entertainment's job to entertain. And so, and that gets, I mean, because you see it like the Bohemian Rhapsody, where it's a good story, but they had to change things to make it more interesting. Or Lincoln, the Spielberg, the Lincoln story, let's change it to make it, it's like the language,
Yeah,
the
but I think
short
that's an
form
excellent point.
You know?
What is just art? You understand? What is just art? I can, if I had my PowerPoint, I would show you a whole bunch of pictures and paintings in the United States, just art. But see, the point, art is never vacant of politics or pain. Art is a perception in which the artist is trying to convey some kind of idea. You can find art with, you know, somebody on the beach doing this and they're planting the flag with the cross, claiming through doctrine of discovery, we're going to claim through Columbus why these heathens don't own this land, and now how we've discovered all of this land and now it's all ours. And you can find a beautiful artwork with that, which celebrates, you see, the politics of, almost like saying, wow, it looks like God actually blessed this whole thing by looking at the artwork. See, that's my point. The artist's rendition is always told like any fable. And artistic licenses is important, but I always tell, all art has a purpose. All stories have a purpose. All history has a purpose. And what is the purpose? It always empowers some and disempowers others as a way to justify and legitimize how and why they do the things unto other peoples. And so it's always important for us to understand, just like with Moana. Yeah? Moana is not a movie that came from Polynesians. Moana is a movie that came from the Disney Empire, using the Polynesians as a backdrop to tell a particular story so they can make a shitload of money, like Pocahontas and all those other movies that they came out with. In the end, that's what it's about. Because it was really about telling the story of a real Moana. It would be actually a story that I think Polynesians would have used and looked at and kind of decided for ourselves, what is the story we want to say. So this is part of the politics. The reason why Disney can do what they do is because they have the capital to do what they can do. They have the economic power to do what they do. We instead become just the objects of reflecting or kind of reacting to what they do. But I'm a big believer, you know, the time is coming. If you look at what's going on there with native filmmakers and native writers and stories that are out there, the reason why Moana came out was a reaction, and I want to say this, it's a reaction to what's going on in the native communities. See, as the native communities start to tell this story, they realize, hey, there's a market out there. Right? Let me give you an example. Ahupua'a. Right? It's a concept. Now you have developers of gated communities talking about their ahupua'a. Now we all know it has nothing to do with the Hawaiian concept of the ahupua'a. It's a marketing ploy because, wow, ahupua'a sounds pro-environmentalist. It sounds it's kind of almost like this kind of very power, and so it becomes co-opted in a way by those who realize if I use words like aloha aina or ahupua'a, why it sounds like it's fitting into the I mean, let's look at the example of mahipono. Why is mahipono called mahipono, you think? Right? We would ask that question. Why not just call it the Canadian investor company is trying to develop our ag lands? Because it's a marketing ploy. That's the point. You see, that's the thing we got to understand. There's a point. There's a reason why they will so-called Hawaiianize and indigenize stuff, not because that's what we want, but it's because it's a way to soften the so-called sale. And so many ways, when I say even like Hawaiian, I always tell people, be careful. Just because it's an Hawaiian, it doesn't mean it's pro-Hawaiian. Let me give you the last example, and I keep on rambling here. I'm going to use Mauna Kea as an example. You know, there are Hawaiian language people believe that if you put up signage upon the development of the telescopes as Mauna Kea, that's a step forward. I mean, how do you think about that? So they're going to construct their telescopes, again, 5 foreign entities, on Mauna Kea, land that still belongs to our people. We never gave consent. And you know what, Hawaiians, you're lucky. We're going to let you guys put up Hawaiian language signs up there to Hawaiianize it. Is that what we want, you think? We're going to Hawaiianize that which desecrates us and think it's a step forward? You see, that's my point. I have nothing to do with the desecration. You cannot Hawaiianize our desecration. of what is ours. You know, that in itself is an invasion. So my point is to understand, just because something is in Hawaiian, it doesn't mean it's pro-Hawaiian. Because I understand that Hawaiian language has been used many a times and co-opted many a times as a way to support those to maintain their control over our people and our lands. And so this is the most important part we got to remember. We got to see through that veil and challenge at all costs. Now, I'm not saying we're perfect. We do things, and I always tell people, do what you think is best at that time. And that should be your motivation. Anyway, sorry. Talking all the time over here.
And then we come to you after. Go ahead.
Okay, just a quick question,
wait,
because
We will have Uncle in the front row first.
Oh,
and
okay.
then you after. Mahalo.
He aha ko manako with Kiliana Tikio, who was Kuliana.
I never saw the movie. Although I know the producer Brian Cohn actually went to a school with him. No, I haven't seen it yet and stuff. I heard it was good. That's all I heard. I don't know what the questions are. I don't know what the issues are and stuff. But I don't know. So maybe somebody else said something. But you get it.
So kind of the same ideas. It is more of a local contemporary story with some elements of past and history, but the Hawaiian language pronunciation and fluidity could have used some more. Yeah, so again, it's a step forward in one direction because it is telling a story, an event that happened here in Hawaii, and it does have some historical context. They do like these flashback scenes where it is, what is that? Accurate, right? It's culturally accurate, it's historically accurate, but the dialogue and some of the communication within the movie isn't any of us would consider good Hawaiian.
okay. So it's such a tricky. It sounds so tricky to incorporate something that's culturally acceptable, and yet be able to, for others with a different motive, to sell it and to be accepted. It just seems like such a hard thing to do at the same time. To what extent does it become acceptable culturally as far as Moana goes, where you're like, okay, they did a good enough job. I still don't agree with everything, but it's okay to push it out, or are you like, Moana shouldn't even have been made, kind of thing, like.
So I think we kind of answered that question where it's already there. It's in the public domain, but we're trying to fit ourselves into making it okay, right? So we've sometimes with these mainstream things that are out there, how can we translate or put ourselves, like what he was saying, into these situations that make it okay? So now we have this thing produced Makolala Hawaii, but is the story okay? Is the story culturally appropriate? No. What would have been even better is taking a story that already exists and producing that, not creating this whole new other story that doesn't really have a foundation in Hawaii at all.
I mean, the way I would respond to it, that's why I said, I don't see it any different than, was there value when the movie James Michener's Hawaii was produced? Was there value when, Blue Hawaii was produced, or Hawaii Five-0? Well, like I said, as a little boy, I guess I would say it was better to actually see Zulu on TV than never have ever to see on Zulu. So even though that might have been, and I've heard American Indians talk about this also. For American Indians growing up, when they finally saw a real American Indian playing an American Indian character, not one Caucasian dressed up like as an Indian, painted red, and even though the storyline was negative in many ways, right, which is to kill the Indian, at least he said, well, at least we saw an Indian on film. So that's my point. There is a step forward. There is a appreciation, at least, that you are visible. But at the same time, you also realize in seeing that visibility, you cannot help but realize that that's just a small fraction of really what's there also. And so, American Indians have spoken about this too. This damned if you do, damned if you don't. I mean, was it better that American Indians not be portrayed at all? Or is it better that they be portrayed badly? I mean, think about that. That's really the question that we ask here. Is it better that we not have a Moana story at all? Or we have one that's I find as being problematic. You know, and I don't know the answer. I just know that's why I say when I look back like in Hawaii Five-0, as silly as sometimes those roles and things that was said on the TV show, I mean, you know, even for me as a little boy, I was excited that I saw Hawaiian on TV. You know, because that was one of the few brown faces you would ever see on TV at that time. And so, you know, as I say, it's a very, very difficult question to kind of come up with an easy answer. I see it as a process of transition. You know, this is just steps towards the eventual what we actually have. And the way we get there is to damn sure make sure we have our own TV production studios, have our own so-called TV stations. And this is really the only way in which we'll be able to produce our own material.
Last question, Kahele.
I'll have, let this student go.
Oh, no, you can go ahead.
No. I talked to them all again.
My first thing is not to play devil's advocate at any sort, but what about the consideration of when talking about Disney movies, the target audience, because they're geared toward kids. So if you really want kids to see, you know, especially young kids, actual truth, because they do come up with movies like you mentioned, why they have Trail of Tears. Well, they come up with movies like Diary of Anne Frank or Shaka Zulu or even Gangs of New York that showed, you know, oppression of the Irish people. But those are more geared toward adult target audience versus kids. And then another part to that was you mentioned about, you know, the creature in Moana. Could that creature been about maybe a representation of Pele or Pele, or maybe a symbol of dualism in that?
Well, to your first question, I mean, I forget it. Just lost my brain.
Target
audience for, you know, Disney being actually geared for kids.
Oh, I would easily say, I know there are a lot of great American Indian stories for young kids already out there. They didn't have to create again, Pocahontas has to do with the so-called settler colonial. It's their story. See, although it's an Indian story, it's not for Indians. See, that's the point.
Right.
I can tell you there are a lot of so-called American Indian stories right now that probably could be turned into fantastic, positive movies for children without the violence and all that bad stuff. That it doesn't have to be, the only story doesn't have to be a story that makes sense to the European and Americans. That's my point. You know, that they're not the final decider of this is a good story and that this isn't. And the only reason why those stories exist, again, is like I was saying, it's really about the other, it's really about them. Pocahontas is not about Pocahontas and her people. Pocahontas is about John Smith and his people. That's why if you look at, see, I would argue, I think it's horrific to teach a child that in fact, when John Smith came, they came with good intentions. And they were loving people. And he was there to save her and civilize her. Because the truth is, John Smith was the point of the spear which brought death. To me, it's like talking about General Rommel, or you're going to bring Hitler, and you're going to produce somehow image that Hitler was a nice guy after all, and he had a love story with this Jewish girl, and we're going to produce this. To me, that is horrific to tell a story that way. The same horrors that Hitler had put upon the so-called Jewish people. If you look at the American history story, and if you look at what happened to those people in, I mean, I can give you another. How about Squanto? That's a whole other story. That is produced by Disney also. But in reality, when we look at the so-called Pilgrim story, let's look at the Pilgrim mythology. What is that story about? As little kids, right? We get taught, as I was saying, 3rd, 2nd grade, they make their half the class dress up like pilgrims, the other half dress up like Indians, and then you march around the school dressed up, and then you might eat pumpkin pie and corn and turkey for lunch, and it has this whole tribute to an event that was a non-event. That whole history of the so-called Pilgrim Thanksgiving never occurred. That is a fantasy that was created, sadly still taught in the schools. Why is it taught? Why is it fantasy taught? See, that's the point you gotta remember. Why is it fantasy taught? What does it justify? What they did. They were friends after all. They loved each other, they shared pumpkin pie. No, they didn't. 20 years after the American Indians, what becomes the, oh my brain again. I forget the name of the war anyway. The Pequot War and others of the East Coast. The same American Indians who saved, this is Squanto guys, who saved the so-called All Saints, who later became the Pilgrims. Taught them how to fish and how to survive. You know, 20 years ago, they went there and murdered every single one of them. Burnt down the village. I mean, I'm talking burnt them alive. The men, the women, the children. But what's sold to the American population, sold is, yeah, but all this Thanksgiving stuff is good. And you get told this mythology because we should actually celebrate this great love. There was no love. There was pure hatred and evil that was perpetuated. Now my point is, there is a reason why the truth isn't being told. And the truth, of course, is not being told because there are those who benefit off that ugly history and continue to this day to benefit off of that. And the way they do that is to continue to sell this mythology. And so for me, it's as an educator, I cannot help as an educator. I hope my children, when they grow up, realize what happened in a so-called Thanksgiving story is a bunch of BS that was meant to brainwash you to see the world in a particular way, not based upon truth, but based upon justifying what had been done to them. I would hope my child would grow up and say, yeah, I know the truth of the history. I know the ugliness. I know, in fact, because once I identify the truth, as the great African revolutionary said, then you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.